So my name is Adam Tyler. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of CSID, and it's an absolute pleasure and privilege both to be at South by Southwest and to be here talking to passcodes. So thank you so much for having me, and again, it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here. So today, my panel is really about making a hacker. And we're living in a really interesting world today because for the first time ever, we're seeing a complete change in the makeup of individuals that are committing fraud. I mean, we look back 30 years and fraud was often associated with cyber gangs out of Eastern Europe, out of Russia, or out of China. Fraud was associated even before then with large capable groups of individuals. You wanted to raid a bank, you needed to have the resources, the people, you needed to take the risk. Nowadays, for the first time ever, the type of individual that is being dragged into these underground communities is under 18 years old. We are looking at a very, very damaging and hugely potentially damaging situation for our young generation, because the young generation are growing up in a world where, I mean, we've all been teenagers. We've all felt that teen angst, that need to prove to the world that we have value and relevance. And in the good old days, that was going on a protest, burning our bras or whatever else. Nowadays, teens can show their angst, they can show their power through very vastly different and more damaging mechanisms. So be that DDoS attacks, be that ransomware attacks. And there's another interesting issue, and that is how the young generation actually portray these threats, how they portray or view these attacks. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen the movie War Games, Matthew Broderick, 1983. Year I was born, I hate to say, I feel old now. But it was an amazing movie, and it actually depicts the situation we're in today better than anything else, better than even recent popular media like Mr. Robot and similar. Because what it depicts was a bunch of kids sat down in their basement, tapping away at a computer, and nearly starting World War III, because they didn't understand the relevance or the consequences of what they're doing. The same is happening today. A couple of years ago, CIA and FBI's internal distribution list got leaked. Who was responsible? A 15-year-old. TalkTalk got hacked, costing the company tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of pounds. Who was responsible? A 15-year-old. I mean, this is the scary reality of the situation. And the scariest thing is that these kids aren't doing it to be malicious. These kids aren't doing it to have fun. These kids are doing it because to them it seems like a game, like a expansion of Call of Duty. It's just a new kind of activity for them to be involved in.
So I mean, talk about, like, I'm really interested in like the underground economy, like where a 15-year-old can kind of get a hold of an exploit that can actually like disrupt like a large system like that.
Well,
how does a 15-year-old get those sorts of tools?
A 15-year-old can do it, a 50-year-old can do it, a 5-year-old can do it.
But they're participating in a very specific online community, right?
But the problem is it used to be back in the good old days when IRC was the prevalent method of communication, before Ajax, before Web 2.0, before interactive websites. It used to be exactly that. The knowledge was required to gain access and be able to carry out these attacks. And that knowledge was in different silos which were very hard to access. Nowadays, everyone has access to those silos of information, because I think everyone's seen the iceberg mentality, how 10% of the internet is above the water, 90% underneath it. Now, that's great if it stood true. The way that I like to see is that global warming, which I know is a touchy subject for America, whether it exists or not, but in the cyber world, global warming certainly does exist. And what has happened is that bottom bit of the iceberg, global warming has affected it so much, it's basically broken off and bounced the top. So all of those nasty places, those nasty locations, those interesting communities of knowledge are basically bounced up to the top. There's a very good reason for this as well. The dark web was all about sources that weren't accessible through normal search engines, that couldn't be found through, because Google didn't have insight. Bing, Ask Jeeves, if anyone can remember that far back. But Google did something incredible, absolutely amazing, and I hope the person that did it is now either a billionaire or sitting on the board. And that was Google's main business is search.
Yeah.
But 5-10 years ago, they started running out of start points to search, to spider content for. So they released Google DNS. DNS sits at the heart of every single computer system. Our computers don't go to google.com. Our computers don't go to bbc.co.uk. Instead, our computer goes to the DNS server, and the DNS server goes, okay, you're looking for bbc.co.uk, here's the address, sends it back to your computer. So Google, or whichever genius in Google, decided they'd put out their free DNS solution. This was integrated by consumers, corporations, governments all around the world. And I'm not going to say Google never do anything just for being good, but in this case, it really gave them a huge amount of value. And that value was new starting points.
Yeah.
Suddenly, everyone using their DNS product, they knew the domains, not the URLs, not the actual locations, but the domains that those people, their customers, were going to. Now that's great if all of your customers are going to My Little Pony appreciation forums and furry whatever and whatever anyone's looking for. But the problem with the internet, which is both the thing that makes it so great but also so bad, is that it's not just good people that are on it. And it's not just used for good reasons. Bad people also use the internet. And as soon as the bad people started using Google DNS, Google suddenly had an influx of new locations, locations that they were previously unaware of, locations which weren't linked to anything else. And that's why that dark web is now bouncing up the top. 2 words in Google and you can be exposed to hundreds of thousands of communities. And one thing I'd like to say is that CSID, we monitor all levels of communities, the most private, the most public. We monitor Tor, we monitor basically protocols which are custom-based protocols which some site operators now use. But I will never say that the best communities are easy to access, because they're not. At the end of the day, Motherfucker and some of the other very, very high-level entities out there are very private, very hard to actually gain a reputation or even to know where they are. However, the issue comes from the fact of the level of information, knowledge, resources and technology which is generally available. So yes, you might not see the latest 0-second exploits available within the first few seconds. But the problem is if we have a look at the world, the majority of people still don't do their updates.
Yeah.
The majority of people don't understand phishing. We've also run into an issue with AV in the fact that traditional antivirus software works off heuristic or signature-based analysis. 1s and 0s can be changed in a second.
Yeah.
You don't need any technical capabilities, you don't need any skills. You can load it into a packer, push a button and have a completely different threat. So Zeus, Citadel, SpyEye, these are strains which have been around for 6-7 years. They're now freely available because the same problem that has affected the general media industry, i.e. the thing which changed the music industry into what we see today, relying on streaming and concerts, piracy. Piracy also affects the bad guys.
Yeah.
Citadel, you can download for free. Zeus, it used to cost thousands of dollars just for a license. You can get it for free. Yes, those strains are many years old, but they're still relevant, they're still useful. And AV software, unfortunately, hasn't been able to keep up with the deluge of new variants that are coming up, or rather new custom created versions of variants that are coming up every single day. And that is the issue, that it'd be a bit like in America. You don't want people to have AK-47s, you don't want people to have semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah.
But if you could go down to the local corner store and get a handgun for free,
Yeah.
it might not be to the same level, but it can still cause damage. It can still cause issues.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing in the cyber world. The problem as well comes from the fact that the young individuals see this as a game and don't understand the consequences. Because, to tell the truth, the world at large hasn't done a great job of actually prosecuting or making children understand how much damage they've actually done. There is a certain amount of leniency which has continued to be pushed worldwide, not just America, not just UK, across the whole of Europe, across the whole of the world. And we need to understand that if there aren't consequences to these actions, if there aren't basically things which will cause damage or loss to the individual, we're never going to be able to tell the young generation not to do it. Young people have moral compasses that are defined and built during their young years. They sometimes don't always understand what is right and what is wrong, especially if there is no specific law, if there is no specific consequence to their actions. The other issue comes from the fact that we need to make them understand that digital data has relevance. And it's an interesting one because the young generation are the generation which have actually defined digital data as having value. You talk to a young kid and say, I tell you what, we're going to take something from you. Would you prefer us to take your Facebook account or your bank account? And anyone under the age of 21 will probably say, take my bank account. They are so much more scared, they see so much more value in their digital accounts. But at the same time, they don't necessarily understand the consequences to the real world through their digital actions. I would say that as virtual reality and other technologies grows and the digital world and the value we put on digital assets increases, it's only going to get worse. Attacks and similar, but more importantly, a little story I'd like to give out which shows how little children realise the consequences of their actions. We went through and did a raid on an individual that was running a Zeus botnet. This is about 5 years ago. We ended up going through the front door about 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was in Manchester, in the UK. And this was a Zeus botnet, which was responsible for stealing only around $2-3 million. Back in the day, that wasn't that much, but still a huge amount of money. I mean, if anyone wants to give me $3 million, would be very happy. Now, we went in, parents in the bedroom, they were shocked. What the hell's going on? We're in our late 40s, early 50s. We don't do fraud, we don't do crime. Our son lives with us though, he's up in the attic. We went up to the attic, 14-year-old kid, who'd basically distributed a Zeus malware strain along with a piece of pirated software. How do you get people to download malware? Distribute it with something that they're going to consume, something that they're going to want to download. And he'd stolen just over $2.5 million. So we thought, great. Bad that this kid did this in the first place, but more importantly, this is a 14-year-old child. He can't have spent $2.5 million. There's no, we're going to be able to recover. He'd lost every last penny. And he, online gambling sites. Honestly, he didn't have the intelligence to know how to wash it. We did do some analytics onto who he lost to and similar, but for him, the money wasn't real. It was ones and zeros on a screen. And again, he didn't understand that his actions actually had a real world consequence. It was like he was living in a virtual land where nothing that he did on his computer had any real effect on individuals or kind of people in the real world. And that is a real mentality which is only growing further. And one of the other interesting things is that I was kind of born like 25 years too early. I always get confused. Yeah, too early. And that's because when I was at school, if you had a computer, if you knew how to turn one on, you were a geek. Like if you played computer games, I grew up with a Commodore 64, VIC-20, a ZX81. You were a geek for using technology. Nowadays, if you don't have the latest games console, If you don't have internet on every device that you own, if you don't have a tablet, you're a loser. Now, with technology growing, and I don't agree with that view, by the way, that wasn't a personal view or statement, but in today's day and age, we're also seeing a shift in how people value others. It used to be the jocks, it used to be the cool kids, the pretty kids, the rich kids. Hackers are now being seen as a new attractive subset of the world. I mean, it's crazy that hackers are almost attractive nowadays. I missed out massively. I'm lucky enough to have met a beautiful girlfriend, and believe me, I don't know how I did that, but it's really strange in the fact that hacking, computers, technology is now seen as an attractive trait. Now, that's great. Everyone should have the ability to learn. Knowledge should be something that people see as an attractive quality. But that we need to understand that knowledge, just having the knowledge is one thing. How you use it is so important as well. We've seen things like, obviously I touched on war games, which is 1983, but more recently the resurgence of hackers in the general media. Mr. Robot was a huge hit. I mean, last year it virtually took over half of South by Southwest. And it's amazing to see that a program and media, a concept focused on hacking, on digital attacks and similar, with a lot of actual insight into the reality of hacks that could be used. 10 years ago, people would have switched off. They would have found it boring. Now it was one of the best programs of last year. And the whole mentality towards digital attacks is changing massively. We as a country need to understand, we as a world need to understand that it's only going to get worse unless we as adults, mature individuals, understand what is out there that is bad for our young people, what could damage their futures, and try to mitigate their access to it. We're already doing masses to take down terrorist information, drug data, but we need to start taking down other content which shouldn't be available to young, influenceable minds and could really ruin their lives. Tor is something which obviously I touched on with the dark web. Interesting thing about Tor is that even Tor is being indexed by Google nowadays. The availability of proxy services like Onion 2 and similar means that if you search for Silk Road and .onion.2 or Alphabay or Hansana on Google, you'll get a link that allows you to view it on the ClearNet. Not going through Tor. Yes, it's very insecure, but at least it allows you to start identifying the resources, the locations, the types of services that are out there. And yeah, we have to be very careful because we have in our hands a generation that are creating so much. This is a generation that is defining the technology landscape and the technology world. But we need to make sure that that generation isn't being corrupted or isn't being destroyed by knowledge and mentalities which could actually go against their future. Thank you so much, absolute pleasure.